The courtroom was silent as the doors swung open, and in walked Victor Langston, a billionaire known for his wealth, arrogance, and ability to bend the rules in his favor. Dressed in an expensive tailored suit, he walked with the confidence of a man who had never heard the word no. He smirked as he took his seat, barely acknowledging the people around him. To him, this was just another inconvenience, one that his money would make disappear. But the moment Judge Olivia Carter entered the room, something shifted. She was young, sharp, and not the least bit intimidated by the powerful man in front of her. As she settled into her chair, Victor leaned back, a cocky grin spreading across his face. Did they run out of real judges today? He chuckled, his voice dripping with condescension. A few gasps echoed through the courtroom, but Olivia didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her glasses, her expression calm and unreadable. Victor's lawyer smirked, thinking this would be an easy win. After all, he had gotten away with far worse. But what he didn't realize was that this wasn't just any judge. Olivia Carter had built her career on standing up to men like him. And today, Victor Langston was about to learn a lesson money couldn't buy. As the gavel came down, the air grew thick with tension. Victor had no idea that the next few minutes would change everything for him. Victor leaned back in his chair, still wearing that smug expression, as if this entire trial was just a minor inconvenience. His lawyers were already preparing their defense, confident that money and influence would once again tip the scales in their favor. Olivia, however, remained unfazed. She glanced down at the case files in front of her, her mind already dissecting every detail. The charges against Victor were serious: fraud, corruption, and unethical business practices that had ruined the lives of many hardworking people. But to him, they were just words on paper, obstacles that his legal team would bulldoze through. He had done it before, and he had no reason to believe today would be any different. Olivia, on the other hand, saw things differently. She had spent years studying cases like his, men who believed their wealth put them above the law. And she wasn't about to let him walk away without facing the consequences. She knew this trial wasn't just about Victor. It was about sending a message that power couldn't always buy freedom. Victor tapped his fingers on the desk, growing impatient. "Let's get this over with," he muttered under his breath. His confidence was unshaken, but there was something about the way Olivia studied him that made him uneasy. For the first time, a sliver of doubt crept into his mind. Little did he know, this courtroom was about to become the one place where his money had no power. The prosecution wasted no time presenting their case. Witness after witness took the stand, each one sharing stories of deception, manipulation, and financial ruin, all at the hands of Victor Langston. A former employee, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, spoke about how Victor's shady business deals had cost hundreds of workers their jobs. A small business owner described how he had been pressured into signing an unfair contract, only to lose everything when Victor backed out of the deal. Each testimony painted a clearer picture of a man who saw people as nothing more than stepping stones to his own success. Victor barely reacted. He whispered to his lawyers, rolled his eyes, and smirked as if the whole thing was a joke. Every now and then, he glanced at Judge Olivia Carter, expecting to see hesitation or uncertainty in her face. But she remained steady, her gaze never wavering. She took in every word, every detail, and Victor couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just listening. She was waiting asterisk. Then came the moment that made even Victor's lawyers shift uncomfortably. A woman stepped forward, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder of documents. She introduced herself as a former accountant for one of Victor's companies, and her voice, though shaky, carried a quiet determination. "I have proof," she said, setting the folder down on the witness stand. For the first time, Victor's smirk faltered. He leaned forward, his fingers gripping the table. His confidence had carried him through countless legal battles before, but something about this felt different. And for the first time in his life, he started to wonder if he had underestimated the people in this room. The courtroom fell into a tense silence as the former accountant opened the folder, revealing stacks of documents. Judge Olivia Carter leaned forward slightly, her sharp eyes scanning the papers as the prosecutor approached the witness stand. The woman took a deep breath before speaking. "These are internal records, bank transfers, falsified reports, and emails proving that Mr. Langston knowingly engaged in fraud." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even Victor's lawyers, who had been calm and composed up until now, exchanged uneasy glances. Victor shifted in his seat, but he quickly masked his discomfort with a forced chuckle. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed. "None of that proves anything." But his voice lacked its usual arrogance. The prosecutor wasted no time pressing forward. "Miss Harper," he addressed the accountant, "can you confirm who authorized these transactions?" She nodded. "Victor Langston. He personally approved these deals, knowing they would lead to financial losses for others while securing profits for himself." She held up a signed document. "This is his signature." The weight of the evidence was undeniable, yet Victor still clung to his confidence. He turned to his lawyers, expecting them to counter the claims. But they remained silent, flipping through the documents, their expressions growing grim. Judge Carter took a long pause before speaking. "Mr. Langston, do you have anything to say before we proceed?" Victor opened his mouth, but for the first time, words failed him. The room was no longer under his control, and the realization hit him like a crushing wave. He was cornered. But just when it seemed the walls were closing in, he straightened his tie, a glimmer of defiance still lingering in his eyes. He wasn't going down without a fight. Victor adjusted his tie and leaned forward, his confidence flickering but not completely gone. He smirked and shook his head. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "People like to blame the successful when things don't go their way." His voice carried its usual arrogance, but there was a slight edge to it, one that hadn't been there before. Judge Olivia Carter remained unmoved. "Mr. Langston, this court deals in facts, not excuses," she said firmly. "And so far, the facts are stacked against you." Just as the prosecution prepared to move forward, Victor's lead attorney stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to call an unexpected witness," he announced, glancing at his client with a knowing look. The courtroom fell silent. Even Victor appeared caught off guard. The doors opened, and a well-dressed man walked in, Victor's personal financial advisor. The tension thickened as he took the stand. Victor's smirk returned, this time with more certainty. The advisor cleared his throat and spoke in a steady voice. "I handled Mr. Langston's accounts for years, and I can tell you he had no direct knowledge of these fraudulent transactions." A wave of whispers spread across the courtroom. Judge Carter narrowed her eyes. "Are you prepared to testify under oath that Mr. Langston had no involvement in these dealings?" she asked. The man hesitated, but then nodded. For a moment, it seemed like Victor had found his escape route. The energy in the room shifted, uncertainty creeping in. But just as the attorney moved to reinforce their defense, the prosecutor smirked. "Your Honor," he said, lifting another folder, "I'd like to introduce new evidence. Evidence that proves Mr. Langston and this witness aren't just business partners. They're family." Gasps filled the courtroom. Victor's expression darkened. The very man he had placed his last hope in was now at the center of an entirely new scandal. The case had just taken a turn no one expected, and now there was no telling how much worse things could get for him. The courtroom erupted into murmurs as the revelation sank in. Victor's financial advisor, his supposed key witness, wasn't just a business associate. He was family. The prosecutor didn't wait for the shock to settle. Mr. Langston and this witness share more than just financial ties. They are cousins, and their entire scheme was orchestrated to protect Victor from legal consequences. Victor's smirk was gone. His attorney quickly objected, but Judge Olivia Carter raised a hand. Overruled, she said, her tone unwavering. Mr. Langston, I suggest you think carefully before your next words. The walls were closing in, and Victor knew it. His confidence had carried him through many trials, but this time, the weight of evidence was too much to ignore. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something urgent, but Victor's mind raced. His entire defense was unraveling. The jury's expressions had shifted. What had once been uncertainty was now unmistakable conviction. Then, just when it seemed Victor had no way out, he did something unexpected. He stood up. His voice, still steady but lacking its former arrogance, filled the room. "Fine," he said. "You want the truth. I played the game the way it's always been played. The difference is, I got caught." The courtroom was dead silent. His admission sent shockwaves through the room, but it was what happened next that truly sealed his fate. The prosecutor stepped forward with one final piece of evidence, a signed confession from Victor's former accountant, detailing every illegal transaction he had authorized. There was no room for escape. Judge Carter straightened in her seat. "Mr. Langston," she said, "justice is not a game. And in this courtroom, your money holds no power." Victor sank into his chair, the weight of his downfall crashing over him. The trial had reached its peak, but the final verdict was yet to come. And for the first time in his life, Victor Langston had no control over what happened next. The courtroom was silent as Judge Carter took a deep breath and turned to the jury. "You have heard the evidence," she said firmly. "It is now time to deliver justice." The jurors exchanged glances before the foreman stood up, clearing his throat. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Victor Langston, guilty on all charges." A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by hushed whispers. Victor clenched